Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Aditi Mukherji, and I am very happy to welcome you all to the third episode of this solar webinar series. Today, we are going to talk about Bangladesh, the solar scenario in Bangladesh, and for that, we have an absolutely stellar panel that across both the government organizations, the donor organizations, as well as from the private sector, as well as researchers. So just a brief introduction what this webinar is about, what today the panelists will be discussing. Today the panel is going to discuss, the context of the discussion is something around Bangladesh has committed to reduce its carbon emissions unconditionally by 5% and conditionally by more percent, I think 15%, provided there are additional funding by 2030 in its nationally determined contribution pledges under the UNFCCC. So solar irrigation is one of the ways in which Bangladesh can replace diesel pumps in off-grid areas with a clean energy alternative. And Bangladesh has almost 15 lakh 15 lakh diesel pumps. So there is a lot of huge opportunity for replacing those diesel pumps and to achieve these kind of carbon emission reductions. Till mid-2020, more than 1,800 solar irrigation pumps have been set up with a total installed capacity of around 50 megawatt. And this is expected to expand substantially in the coming few years. ITCOL is the main main implementer of solar irrigation pumps, but other organizations such as BMDA, BADC, and BREB, those are Bangladesh Rural Electricity Board. They have all implemented solar irrigation pumps. And ITCOL, for example, has also set in target of installing around 10,000 SIPs by 2027. Some of the broader questions that this panel today will discuss are around, is Bangladesh on track to meet its target as far as solar irrigation pumps are concerned? What are some of the operational models of SIP promotion in the country? ITCOL, for example, has a fee-for-service model. Some of the other organizations have individual ownership models, and there's a plethora of different models that are being used. What are the challenges and emerging opportunities? So in this particular third episode of the solar webinar series, experts from Bangladesh, and we are hoping we would also have one expert joining from India, would be discussing some of these, discuss the current status and future challenges of solar irrigation in Bangladesh. With that, I now want to introduce, so we will have a total of 2 hours. We started at 3:30 Bangladesh time. We will finish at 5:30. Now, we have the way the seminar is done, and I think we should have the program, the web link of this seminar on the chat quickly. My colleague will put it there. And I would also request all of the attendees to please introduce yourself in the chat box. And if you have questions when the speakers are speaking, please put it in the Q&A box so that speakers can take those questions. So I want to now introduce our first speaker. We have 4 speakers and I will introduce just as they speak, before they speak. So our first speaker is Mr. Anthony Jude, and he is currently a senior energy advisor as a consultant to Energy Division in Southeast Asia Regional Department and Energy Division of the Asian Development Bank. He used to be with the Asian Development Bank, and he is one of the main authors of the Solar Roadmap of Bangladesh. He will be presenting about this particular roadmap. Mr. Anthony, if you...
Thank you.
I will share the screen and...
Yes, please.
For you, and you can then start.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Just to give you a background to this SIP roadmap, why ADB was involved in this was basically back in 2017, ADB had approved a loan to Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board to do some rural electrification program. And then towards the end, we got a request through BREB through the government to ADB to help develop support some 2,000 solar PV pumps, and they wanted grant financing. So we looked around, and ADB then approached GCF, and GCF provided about 22.2 million for the 2,000 SIP program that we were looking at. But there was a catch to it. They said, look, to give grant money to Bangladesh, we would like to have something concrete, that there is a commitment from the government side to carry this forward. And hence the roadmap came up out of that initiative. And that's where we were with the program. And we wrapped up this roadmap late last year after several consultative meetings in Bangladesh. And it's now with the power division for final approval and adoption. Now, can we move to the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay, here we have about 1.24 million diesel pumps and a little over 341,000 electric pumps operating in Bangladesh. And these pumps, they consume about 1 million tons of diesel, these diesel pumps. And about the electric pumps, they take up almost 2,000 megawatts of electricity during the summer period, especially when all of them are running. And what we are trying to say is, solar irrigation of the SIP program should be given priority as part of the surface water and introduce sustainable water management program. And this should be in line with the government regulations, the minor irrigation and the groundwater management program and the groundwater management rules of 2019. The roadmap covers a period of 2021 that's starting from this year to 2030. And we had 3 components proposed. And this is in line with the Paris Climate Agreement and the Bangladesh NDC commitment and climate, energy, and agriculture policies. Next slide. Now, the roadmap is actually quite ambitious, and basically what we looked at, given that there are so many diesel pumps and also so many electric pumps out there, so we came up with the 3 components. Component A is basically a standalone program that is looking at replacing diesel pumps. We are looking at targeting 1,000 megawatt of solar pumps to be installed. That means about 45,000 SIP to be phased out about 25% of the diesel pumps by 2030 if the program gets implemented. This alone will cost somewhere around 1.54 billion, of which 700 million will have to come through loans or grants to support the program. Component B is basically the hybridization or solarization of the electric grids, electric pumps. And here we are targeting initially on a pilot basis, first to take 25 megawatt peak. And that to implement that, this will be about 1,250 hybrid pumps that will be under net metering scheme. And if there's a success in this program by 2023 and the uptake is great, then we want to install another 475 megawatt peak by 2030. And this will cost about 20 million, of which 6 million will be through grants and loans in the pilot phase. Now, component C, this is where it goes together with agriculture. We are looking at putting decentralized solar PV system along an agriculture-led. So agriculture and solar to be going hand in hand. So towards more like the agro farming or agro solar culture that is being done also in India and many other developed countries. Here again, we target 25 megawatt peak, and we are looking at ranges of 50 kilowatt peak to 10 megawatt peak systems to be installed. And here, basically, we are looking at farmers taking an equity role to the extent possible. And here, investment is about 25 million, of which 5 million will be in loans. And the balance has to come through grants, through pilot financing. Now, the grid connection, that will be a challenge. In most of the areas, the grid connection for some of the programs will have to be done through the distribution network. Although Bangladesh has been successful in extending the grid, the last mile connection is still a problem as far as I know. As of March last year, there's huge voltage drop along the distribution lines, and there are some farmers complaining that they can't evacuate the power. Even some solar projects have complained about evacuation problem. So while government has done a bit on extending the line, there has to be more investments on the distribution line and the substations to help improve the voltage regulation along the line. Totally, we are looking at 2,000 megawatt peak to be installed, and that will be about 1,300 gigawatts to be exported to the grid. Next slide, please. here what we are saying is basically to get this program roadmap moving, there has to be a big transformational change. And if the transformation can be done, and especially we feel that component C can make this transformational change, aside from the diesel pumps being taken off, we can see farmers getting an equity stake in the investment. Basically, looking at this program can help support poverty and helps the farmer, empowers the farmers as well. If you can get them in together, it's not only addressing climate change, there's also poverty element, there's also inequality addressing. These are some examples that I said. The left side is a program somewhere in Anand in Gujarat in India, where the right side is a project somewhere in Europe. Next slide, please. As I said, financing will be a challenge, but we try to make this in a way that it is not kind of a burden to the government. Although the cost may be high, 1.5 million, this maybe you can look at a large 1,000 megawatt coal-fired plant will come around that cost if the government's really looking at. But if you can take this RE program seriously and try to implement it, the 1.54 is only for component A and 45 million for component B and C. We are suggesting to the government to come up with a Seep fund. The government could come about 250 million. The initial draft we saw, we also looked at maybe 300 to 400 million, because if you look at the Paris Communion, government had already indicated they will set aside 600 million under the NDC for solar PV. But here we are saying, why don't the government show 250 million upfront? Then we can go to GCF, ADB, and all the others to bring the balance funding to it, maybe another 400 to 500 million, and then we can take this program back. Private sector will bring in their equity and their debt financing. They will manage from either commercial banks or from their own internal financing. So that should not be a problem. But to get this program moving, the roadmap will need to be implemented, and to take that forward, that is something the government will have to think seriously. Next slide. Now, component A, as I said, the component A, basically we are looking at only displacing the diesel pumps as a target. We're looking at providing grant financing, 50% of the project cost, depending. And this can come down over the years by 2030 to 40%. And we want STRATA to look at this, STRATA to play a bigger role in looking at how you can do the centralized procurement and managing the project itself. We are looking at also allocating 2% grant from the financing to agencies that manage these projects. That some 2% can go off that, can be split between STRATA, BADC, BMDA, because these are the agencies that are implementing the projects on the ground. So, and also introducing proper O&M programs on this. Most of the projects we have seen in some of the pilot areas that we have done in initial, the panels are broken or the inverters are off because there was no O&M conceived as part of those pilot projects. So if this O&M is not built into it, then its program is going to collapse. Farmers and sponsors can avail of, of bank financing. We are looking at, farmers can also get up to 25% of their contribution. If they're connected to the grid, they can get back from selling surplus. In the first 10 years, they will get back 25 years. But these panels can go up to a 20-year period. Now, new panels, you can even go up to 25-year period. And we also support that micro irrigation be part of this. They should be including looking at only micro irrigation. Next slide, please. Component B is basically only looking at the electric pumps. If you can look at hybridizing them or converting them to solarizing those pumps. Here we are looking at a grant financing of 30%, looking during the pilot phase, and then seeing how the uptake is. It can be lowered down to zero as we go down and the costs go down. Again, similar as to the earlier, we are looking at 2% grant financing for the other projects and the excess power to be sold through net metering to the grid. Next slide. Component C, here's the farmers. We are looking at farmers signing up deals, agricultural land, signing up with IPPs, anywhere between a 500 kilowatt peak to a 10 megawatt peak, and connecting to the grid. This will be depending on the Seep guidelines that the government puts in place. And here we are looking at the minimum insulation of at least 1.5 to 2 meter up from the ground, so farmers can plant their crops under the panels. And here I think STRATA, and especially more importantly DAE, the Agriculture Department, should be providing technical assistance, advising the farmers in terms of what crops can grow under shade and what can add value. More so what we have told in the report that SREDA and the government, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, need to set standards. If the agriculture crop, if they were producing about, let's say, 5 tons under that particular piece of land, but because of shading, they're producing less, say maybe less by 20%, then that is fine. That's so still 80%. So that kind of norm has to be fixed, because in most countries in Europe, Japan, Korea, and other places, they set the standard. If the crop production goes more than less by 30% or 40%, then they will not support those kind of projects. But that's how in the developed countries they have set it. The norm is because the farmers will be offset because they're signing a lease, they'll get a 20-year PPA, they're assured of whether the crop fails, but they're getting the leasing of the land, so they're getting income. So the farmers are kind of managed. So in a way, we are suggesting if farmers want to take an equity grant, then grant financing could be given to those farmers to take an equity stake in those kind of projects. Next slide. I look at this as having this IFS, what I call it for the transition, enabling transition. We look at the IFS, what is institutional, the finance, and also sustainability comes into play. So the institutional area is we're looking at the energy, water, and agriculture nexus. Is how do you introduce efficient agriculture production and efficient irrigation system as part of that. SREDA has to play a role here, and what we are saying, they should basically work with the other key ministries, because there are a number of ministries there, looking at how the monitoring, reporting, and verification is done on the ground, establishing technical standards. But technical standards could be adopted from what IPCOL has already got in place. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, but to make sure there's safeguard on the quality of the systems in place. The role for implementing agencies should be enforced. They should be rigid. They should be basically kind of looking at the rights to proper organization structure should be in place, achieving the targets and a strong provision for proper O&M. And financing, of course, financing is something how we should be working with the farmers and the sponsors to find adequate financing, and the financing should be more or less standardized. Next slide, please. Now on financial, this financing, there are a number of challenges on the financing side, and I talked about the taxes. These are very self-preferential. There should be a dedicated fund that also gets seeking funds for climate finance, zero financing from GCF or GEF. They will sometimes getting grant financing may be difficult, but GCF may give zero financing because everybody wants grant financing and they have a demand on grant financing. Some agency will give zero financing, but that can be phased out over a 20-year period or 30-year period. So you still can get projects to be done. What I'm saying is also here, government, SREDA and others would have to come in is because RE policy says 15% VAT exemption from all RE equipment is there. That's a policy allows. But the RE policy recommends the power divisions assist private sector also to find land, because land is not, it's always been a challenge in Bangladesh. And that is something we always looked at talking to the government and say, if you want solar to go ground mounted or this, you have to find the land. Government could outright purchase this and then provide this to the government. The land could be the government equity stake into the project. So private sector can even lower the prices down. So you will see prices like in India or in Cambodia and Malaysia where the prices are coming down, not looking at 12 cents, 14 cents like what we are seeing in Bangladesh. I think the latest was probably still 9 cents or 10 cents in Bangladesh. The RE power plants also get tax exemption for 5 years, whereas a conventional power plant guy gets income tax exemption for 15 years. So, there's a mismatch in there. So some of these policies are there, but this is an area that government needs to work on to really help facilitate some of these things. Next slide, please. At the last, sustainability. And here, this is very important for sustainability. Basically, awareness. The farmers need to have ownership. Basically, we have seen that most other solar projects, some of them do not have ownership, like what we have seen that is the solar home system in Bangladesh. A lot of households got access in the rural areas with solar home system, but with the grid, a lot of them are giving up the solar home system back to IPCOL, and now IPCOL has to deal with it. there has to be strong ownership. The O&M has to be built as part of that. There has to be compensation mechanism, which the government needs to really look at, see, showing the farmers and the persons adopting SIP systems that they can get paid, that this is transparent. And what we have said also in our report is to have an insurance mechanism so the farmers can also be, protected if there's a poor harvest or the cyclone, but they still have to service the loan for the SIP systems. So how can the system help? So some insurance mechanism should be in place. And if you're looking at the larger, like in the component C, where I look at a larger system, some of the larger systems can provide ancillary service to meet the peak demand in some of the local areas. And that is something that the government can look at and help support. I will stop there. I think my time is up too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I think there was a question from someone, I think Marie is asking how big the area is for component C. We are looking at, we have put it into the system because the land is a big issue. And so that's why we are looking at the areas. It's up to the farmers. Farmers can group themselves, 5 farmers, 10 farmers, or 50 farmers can get the land together, whether to put a 50 kilowatt peak to a few megawatt peak. So you're looking at megawatt, you're looking at acres coming into picture. It's a big, so depending on the size.
Right. We have one more question. Perhaps you can take it from the, it's in the Q&A box. What has been the experience so far of solar irrigation project been implemented by BREB? I believe the ADB loan, the implementing agency will be Bangladesh Rural Electricity Board, Electrification Board. So has that started yet?
Okay, when we started this, the grid extension had not taken place. Okay, we'll be very honest about it. We had more than 4,000 applicants. Everybody wanted. I think sometime late last year, this 4,000 kind of disappeared, came to come to 400 because the grid extension, because when we were doing the plan, I think the grid extension was only 67, 68%. Let's say less than 70. But now you had 98%, and I believe this year they will be almost 100%. So that has been a bit of a challenge. Right. So I have not followed up after the last couple of meetings with BREB, but I know they had problems, and that's why the chairman wanted to come up with kind of suggestions how finance. So that's why we came up with the grant financing. Initially, we had grant financing, a much lower figure we wanted, but then because of getting the incentive out, that's why we went up to 50% to get that. Okay. And I think BADC, I think Sarwar Hossain will say, I think they are looking at 65%, if I'm not mistaken. I think because BADC they don't look at a financing of business, they look at it as a service entity doing service for the public. So they'll go for higher 65% as a grant financing component.
Right. So a very good, excellent presentation, because it also sets out the ambition that the country has in terms of solar irrigation. And you also have talked about some of the current challenges. With that, I want to now move on to our next speaker. For the audience, if you have further questions for Mr. Jude, please ask them right away because he needs to leave. He has another meeting at the ADB. And I'm just checking if there is... any further. There is one more question on what is the grant now for BREB. So I suppose that can be answered by one of the panelists. In case Mr. Anthony leaves while we are discussing, thank you so much for this excellent presentation.
Thanks. Thank you.
It helps set the tone for this webinar very nicely.
All right. Very good. Thanks.
So now I want to move on to our next speaker, who is Mohamad Golam Sarware Kainat, who is currently the Director, Joint Secretary of Renewable Energy, Renewable and Sustainable Energy Department, SHREDA of Power Division under Ministry of Power, Energy and Mineral Resources. SHREDA is Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. Sorry, I got the full form wrong. Welcome, Mr. Kainat. Can you share your screen and start your presentation? You will have 12 minutes.
Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohamad Golam Sarware Kainat, but you already told. I have here 14 slides total, and my topics given solar irrigation in Bangladesh, current situation and future prospect. The first slide is Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. Here, what SERDA is doing, that's given in a broad sense. One is promote renewable energy, and another one is adaptation of energy efficiency measures and also energy conservation. SERDA actually deal with these both two objectives, but there are also some additional issues like climate change issues. These are automatically involved with these two issues. So far, we may go to renewable energy, we can reduce the carbon emission. For Bangladesh, everybody this is a very highly vulnerable country regarding to climate. But Bangladesh.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Kainat. Can you speak a bit closer to the mic? You are not very audible. Your volume is a bit low.
Now it's okay.
Yes, now it's better. Thank you.
Now I am audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, what I have told, I can review again that Bangladesh is a very highly vulnerable country regarding to climate. Though in Bangladesh, this emission rate is very less, only 0.35% regarding respect to global emission. And Bangladesh has some NDC targets. Number one is to reduce GHG emission by 5%. This is an unconditional target, and the range is 2030. And another one is conditional, which is 15% to reduce. And the sector related to this are power, transport, and industrial areas. Next slide. The irrigation, solar irrigation. Actually, what are the backgrounds? Why solar irrigation is so important in Bangladesh? Actually, in Bangladesh, agricultural sector, this is very vital. Main crops, foods, and others almost we got from our agriculture sector, and mostly we depend on our agriculture. And agriculture, actually, Bangladesh, it influenced Bangladesh economy in many ways. In case of employment, food security, and economic growth. Efficient water management also an important factor for the productivity of agricultural items. That's why actually we need to search alternative energy like solar or like renewable energy for our food and energy security to mitigate the risks of price hike of petroleum products. Certainly, one morning we find that the petroleum products price already being high. So we need to mitigate that one. We cannot bear this suddenly a price hike for these petroleum products, and also to change, also to address the climate change impact. In our country, the solar irrigation has a very huge potential for scale up, provided if we can put a very suitable business model. Actually, this is a very tough situation to put a very suitable model because now in our country, accessibility of electricity is around 98%. You know, in Bangladesh, there are 68,000 or more villages. Almost all villages already got electrification. Only 1,000 or less villages are left to get electricity. So that's why Seep need to very fight in a high level with the electric pumps or other systems. Those are running with electricity. So though it has a very high potential, but business model we need to put, it is very difficult in our country nowadays. And another very potential item of solar irrigation, that the reduction of greenhouse gas we can reduce by using the renewable energy, these greenhouse gases. What government outlooks in case of implementation of Seep? If we see our NDC, that targets or goals can be achieved by maximizing the use of renewable energy. These are already we have taken in our NDCs. Then in 7 5-year plan, actually emphasis given for the solar irrigation expansion or farm mechanization with the use of renewable energy and including the private sector investment. Then if we come to the minor irrigation policy, it also encourages the use of renewable energy or solar irrigation. Bangladesh has a very long-term program that's we defined as the Delta Plan. It also emphasized for developing long-term RE and the potential to harness. Next, national agricultural policy also encourages the use of solar irrigation pump instead of diesel pumps. Those are responsible. Those are responsible for pollution of our this village environment. Then finally, the National Agricultural and Mechanization Policy 2019, it also encourages the use of solar irrigation for crop cultivation and multiple crops production. So these are the views of the government in our country. Next, Mr. Anthony Jude already told the draft Seep SIP solar irrigation pumps, this roadmap, which is targeted for 2021 to 2030. That roadmap has actually 3 components. Component A, B, C, got already explained by Mr. Judge. I already briefed, I have put here very briefly all the items. In component A, it is stated that standalone Seep systems 45,000 will be installed by 2030, and their installed capacity will be 1 gigawatt peak. At a roadmap that is draft still replace around 320,000 numbers of diesel pumps. They actually can irrigate 690,000 hectares of land, serving around 25 lakh of farmers, and reduce around 300,000 tons of diesel use annually. So this component A stated these items. Component B, actually the hybridization or solarization piloting. These are piloting phase, and they installed around 1,250 numbers of pumps. Those will be grid connected solarization pump, and their installed capacity will be around 25 megawatt peak by 2023. Component C, that draft roadmap stated that a small decentralized ground mounted grid connected solar photovoltaic piloting, and that capacity will be 25 megawatt peak by 2023. This is the nutshell of the draft solar irrigation farm roadmap 2021.
Mr. Kainat, you will have 2 more minutes and your voice is again becoming very dim. Maybe you need to talk closer to the microphone. And you have 2 more minutes. Yes, this is better. Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
Okay, now we come to the next slide. Okay, can I explain again the previous slide?
No, it's okay. I think
okay.
we could hear, but it's not so clear. This one is much clearer.
Okay. Now the irrigation equipment used in 2018 and 2019. You have see on the table that deep oil, there are total is around 35,430. These were used, and at that time diesel operated were 2,204. So total was 37,634. So all are here. Shallow tube oil were there 13,57,532. Low lift pump were 1,87,188. So it was altogether was 15,82,354. Out of this, 12,43,507 were diesel operated, and the area irrigated by this pump total given 53,19,223 hectare. Okay, next slide. I can show how much diesel is consumed by this diesel pump. So there is a calculation in this table. That calculation is actually self-explanatory. If you see the total import cost of diesel in a year, it is around 4,578 crore Bangladeshi taka, and consumption is around 12.5 lakh tons. This is actually annually consumed by diesel pumps. So you can imagine how much actually GHG gas are emitting using of this diesel pump. Actually, our target is to replace this diesel pump. So far we can, and that's why our government actually try to implement the SIP programs. Next is the present status of Seep in our country. If you see the table, then you can see organizational wise the number of quantity of Seep installed, and also their capacity are given on the rightmost column. So total number of SIP are 2,151, and the capacity is 45.93, that is installed capacity megawatt. And if you go to the adjacent, just a right picture, you can see this regional wise the installed solar pump statistics. You can see here that Rangpur area is the largest area which are using SIP systems, that is 60%, Khulla using 29%, Rajshahi area using 10%, and other remaining 1% is using in Chittagong, Dhaka, and other areas. So the maximum user is the northern part of our country. This right below side, you can see the existing financial structure, which is practicing by ITCOL almost. That is the sponsors equity 15%, concessionary loan for 10 years, that is 35%, and grant is 50%. So out of 100%, this is the model now, financial structure by which the sponsors can install the SIP systems. Next slide is SIP project. Actually, this can be a futuristic scenario. Already BREB, Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board, has taken 2,000 SIP projects, and their targets are given also 355 numbers by March. They will complete the project works, 350 numbers by July of this year, and rest 1,295 projects are currently under approval process for 32 Polli Bidyut Samiti of REB. Next, BARD will soon start 11 SIP projects. They are doing their paperworks, and within a short time, they will start this project, inshallah. Last, the BARI, this is Agriculture Research Institute. They taken 8 Seep research projects at coastal areas, and the statistics is given in Kuakata, Potuakhali district. You can see in the table there are 3 numbers of projects. Borguna, Amtoli of Borguna is 1, Charfishan of Bhola there are 3, and Sodor of Noakhali there are 1. Actually, these pumps and panels are totally portable. They are actually pumping the water, actually the surface water near the field or house. There are many ponds or a small water body that actually we call this surface water. So during the watermelon season, also this BT begun, that is the one type of brinjal, BT, these crops getting this irrigation. Other is tomato. That crops also get this irrigation, and some vegetables, leaves, they are producing, and they are using this type of pumps, SIP systems, to irrigate their these crop fields. The other time out of the season, that time these panel and pumps are being used for household purpose. They are using for lights, fans for household. So these projects have also some battery equipment, and rest of the time out of this seasonal irrigation, that is watermelon and others, they using the battery for lighting their house and getting the fan systems. Next, the challenges of ships in Bangladesh. You see, the excess energy utilization. This is really a challenge because the farmers normally, they installed the pumps in the center of the field. So if they want to use the energy which are in the ideal time of irrigation period, so they need to move the farm, which is very, very difficult. So excess energy utilization for farmers, it is very challenging. And rapid grid expansion. Hello, are you getting me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Can you
Okay.
wind up in another 1-2 minute, please? You are a bit
Yes.
over time. Yes.
Yeah. That is
We can hear you.
Okay, that is rapid grid expansion. This is also one challenge. Policy level intervention, that is also another challenge. And subsidized tariff, though it is sometimes a prospect, but becomes sometimes challenges, and a suitable business model also the same issue. Next slide is a Standalone Seep. This is a technical diagram. You can see here there are PV modules, a DC breaker, and a pump controller driver and water pump without grid connection. So this is a standalone, and almost the Seep systems in Bangladesh are standalone still. And there is another Seep grid integration. You can see that there is a breaker that can put the power into the pump controller driver or water pump, and other time it can switch to the grid, so that the farmer in the ideal period they can switch the power to national grid. Next is net metering guideline. You can see if it is come under the net metering guideline, then the sponsor actually can send their power to the national grid, and can get some credit for for their extra power, and at the end of financial year they can get some credit if there are plus credit they have. Okay, thank you very much to listening me.
Thank
Okay,
you
thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much, Mr. Kainat. I think that was a very, very rich presentation, taking us through the various plans and programs, as well as the various details around grid connection. I am hoping to have some discussions at the end of the presentations where we would talk more about the challenges of grid connection. And one of the most important challenges that you said was around the issue of how do you use the excess capacity of solar irrigation, because most of the irrigation happens in the Boro season. That's the most water consumptive crop. That's when the most of the irrigation is. And what do we do with the rest of the pump with the rest of the year? So that's a very important question. And we also have a few Q&A here. So I would just hold on those Q&A because we are running a bit behind schedule. And I would request my colleague, Marie Charlotte, to share her screen. Mr. Kainat, if you can unshare yours, please. If you can stop screen share. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So we will have more questions for you later, and we have already some questions, but we'll ask them later. Over to you, Marie, please. Thank you. Are you muted, Marie? We can't hear you.
Yes, I was muted.
Okay.
Okay, I suppose you now see my screen. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I thank you, the two presenters who really set the scene of solar irrigation in Bangladesh for now, so that will make things quite easier for me. Thank you for that. And what I will simply present here is the early result that we have with the impact assessment of the EATCOL Seep that we are conducted with IWMI as part of the solar project. So I think the current scenario has already been clearly established. So far, there is something like 2,000, almost 300 solar irrigation pumps in the country, coming from a plethora of organizations. I think that has been mentioned, and I won't mention that again. You will see with the map that those solar irrigation pumps are mostly located in northwest and southwest of Bangladesh. And I would maybe reply to one of the questions which was asked in the Q&A, which is, can we have those Seep in area with water stress? So the answer for the map is yes, but provided this is surface water. So this is what's happening in Barindran tract. I mean, those are Seeps which use surface water and not groundwater. Also, what I want to underline with this is that yes, we have solar irrigation in Bangladesh. We maybe have 3,300 pumps, but also let's be honest with what the sector is. I mean, that's still quite a nascent sector as compared to the 1.24 million of diesel pump and to the 0.34 million of electric pumps. So yes, those pumps are there, but this is still at an early stage. Then what is also interesting to keep in mind when we talk about solar irrigation in Bangladesh is that we have a very rich scene with different models. So there is the fee for service model, which is really the EATCOL model, which is the main organization in terms of the number of pump and power installed so far. But there are other models. I mean, there is this ownership model. There are also cases with group ownership model. So it's very interesting to keep in mind these different models and probably to better understand what these different modalities can be and how farmers can benefit from solar irrigation under these different modalities. What I'm doing here and what we are doing is that with this impact assessment is mostly to focus on the EATCOL solar irrigation pump. So the principle is that there is a grant 50% of the value of the equipment, a loan for 35% with a 10 years repayment period, and a 15% equity. And this loan and the grant are actually not provided to farmers, but are provided to what we call sponsor organizations. So those sponsor organizations can either be private for-profit organization or NGOs, so for non-profit organization. And those organizations, so the sponsor will then sell water to the farmers who will themselves pay irrigation charges. So that's what we call the fee for service model. So, and that's the framework we are talking about with this fee for service model. So the sponsor is at the center, providing irrigation to the farmers, getting equipment from the suppliers, and then receiving the grant, loan, and technical advice from ITCOL, and they are themselves connected to the government of Bangladesh and to development partners. So what we are doing in this impact assessment of the ITCOL supported solar irrigation pumps is to look at different research questions, different angles. We are obviously interested in what's happened to farmers once they get access to solar irrigation. So what is the impact of Seep on the agricultural practices, on the outcomes, on farmer behaviors, in terms of equity and in terms of water access? That's the first angle we are thinking of really at the farmer level. And for that, we'll be doing a household survey, hopefully a baseline this year and a follow-up in 2 years from now. Then we are interested at the resource level. So here, what is the diesel consumption? Does the Seep means a reduction in diesel consumption? And what does that mean in terms of water application? So that's the groundwater angle, obviously. Then we are really interested of this Seep characteristic with this different type of organization, different power install, different type of pump financing, etc. So how does these characteristics influence the operation of the Seeps? And for doing so, we design what we call a Seep level survey. So the idea is to have a representative sample of the Seeps that will be surveyed for 3 times a year for 3 years. I'll come back on that. And then we are interested at the grid level because we know that ITCOL will be connected to the grid. Some of their Seeps, actually, I think the latest number is 13 of their Seeps. So we want to know what does that change? I mean, how will that affect the operation of the Seeps? How will that affect the water buyers and the groundwater consumption? So this is the framework of the research that we are conducted with the ITCOL Seep. I'm now going a bit deeper into some early results. So what has happened is that some of our research work was delayed last year due to COVID, but one thing we have been able to launch is a phone survey, which target Seep operators. So Seep operators are the people who operate the Seep on the ground. And we conducted a phone survey with 82 of them. Well, not yet 82, but the target is to have 82. And so these 82 Seeps have been selected with a random proportional sampling. So we are proportional in terms of the location of the Seep, in terms of the private or NGO operators, and in terms of the years of approval. And we conducted this survey in October and November last year, collecting data on what's happened for the Seeps during the last Kharif 2 season. So the last Kharif 2 season is the monsoon season, which more or less is from June, July to October, November. And so I'm now just presenting you what we see with this early result from the Kharif 2 season last year. The first thing that we see, and that I want to underline, is not surprising and is not a performance issue. We see that 49% of the Seeps provided irrigation in the last Kharif 2 season. That's not surprising because this is a monsoon season. So this is obviously not the season where farmers mostly need irrigation. So that's not the most interesting season, if we want so, for the Seeps. But still, even during that monsoon season, we have half of the Seeps that we surveyed who provided irrigation to the farmers who are in their command area. We see some differences in terms of the locations. We have more Seeps providing irrigation in Khulna district than in Northwest. What we also see is that even if the Seeps provided irrigation during this monsoon season, not the entire command area was covered, which is, again, perfectly normal, I would say. What we see is that 35% of the command area was served. Beyond the service irrigation, which is the most important service for the Seep, there is also an important and interesting feature of the Seeps in Bangladesh, which is about the provision of other agricultural services. So it can be husker, grinder, access to credit, access to inputs, marketing facilities, all kind of services which will be combined and which will be on the SIP side. And we see that we had in our sample 4 SIPs which provided this type of services, again, during this Kharif 2 season. So that will be interesting to see how will that differ in other season and across different years. Then we look at the crop irrigated during that season. Here again, I would say no big surprise. We are in the Kharif season, so the most important crop is Aman. So Aman is the monsoon rice. What is interesting to see is to go a bit into details of how does that work in terms of the relation between the SIP and the farmers. So what we saw is that for Aman, farmers have a per season contract which are established in advance. And then on average, they pay 1,100 taka per biga irrigated for the entire season. So that's a seasonal contract. And that's the same thing which happened for house. House is the summer rice, but which can also in some cases be cultivated during the Kharif. So for house, they also add a per season contract with a slightly lower tariff on average. We had 3 cases with other crops, which may seem anecdotal, but I think it's still important to show those cases here because that's also just an example of the type of diversification which may or may not happen when access to solar irrigation is possible. So we had 1 cases with Jude and 1 cases with Chile. In these 2 cases, the payment was a per irrigation payment. So the farmers has to pay for each irrigation which is provided at a tariff of 250 taka per biga for Jude and 200 taka per biga for Chile. And then we had 1 case with maize, but actually in 1 seed, but actually only for 3 farmers. And in that case, it was again a seasonal contract. Then we are looking at what does that mean to have access to irrigation and how does that work to have these irrigation services in place for the farmers. And so we are interested in looking at the decision on water allocation. And what we are seeing is that on average, for 58% of the SIPs which we surveyed, the operator is the one who decides the allocation of water based on his own observation of the plot. So he has his contract with the farmers for the season, and then he himself look at the plot and decide where water is needed. And then we have 36% of the farmers of the SIPs where farmers actually demand and sell for irrigation. So they contact the farmer on phone or they go to him and ask him for irrigation. And we only had 5% of the SIPs where there was a water schedule which was established in advance. Here again, that's what we see now, or that's what we saw for the Kharif 2 season. That will be interesting to see how this may evolve or may be different for different seasons. And another important point is that we saw that 65% of the operators don't require the presence of the farmers during irrigation. That's quite a departure from what you would see with diesel irrigation. For diesel irrigation, the farmers has to be in the field, he has to work to irrigate his field. That's not the case, or that's not the case in most of the SIPs that we surveyed. So that's something which we think is important to underline in terms of the convenience of solar irrigation for the farmer. Then we looked at who are the beneficiaries of solar irrigation during this Kharif 2 season. So what we see, just on average, big picture is that there is on average 33 farmers who benefited from irrigation per SIP during this Kharif 2 season, and then we look into detail at who they are. We see that 36% of these farmers were not owner of the land that is cultivated and irrigated, so they are either sharecropper or leaser. Just comparing that with the data from the last agricultural census, it seems that it's slightly higher than what it would be in general. So we will be interesting to look at this figure over time and over season again to see if how this will be evolving and how this will compare to non-SIP location. And similarly for the land tenure, we see that 62% of the farmers who have been served by the SIPs were teeny farmers, so owning less than 0.5 acre of land. So that's the picture we have for the beneficiaries. Then last year was, I don't know how to say that, quite a complicated year in terms of the natural disaster in Bangladesh. So we had the cyclone Amphan and we had the floods during the summer. So we are just looking at what's happened for the SIPs with the cyclone. We actually had only 2 SIPs among the 62 or among the 26 which were in Khulna with damages on their panel. It's quite a limited number. And what we saw is that in these 2 cases, the reparation has been done quite quickly, so it has not really affected the operation of the pump. Then looking at this floods, so there have been massive floods in the months of July and August last year. For the SIPs, we had 2 SIPs which were located in areas which have been flooded, which means that the command areas was flooded and the almond harvest was lost. So that's one point. But maybe more importantly, we also saw that we have 25 SIPs which in those cases, the operators told us that they were not operational because of the because of the heavy rains, and simply because there was no demand for irrigation because of those rains. So again, that would be interesting to look at the same location next year to see if, depending on the rain, we have different observation. Then we also have a few questions on COVID-related situation. So one point was simply to wonder what have been the consequences of the COVID-19 induced measure for the farmers which are located in the command area. The big picture again is that there seems to be quite limited effect of the COVID-19 induced measure in the SIP communities, but when and where we saw effect, it's mostly in terms of the access to inputs, the cost of input and the access, and also the cost and access to laborers. So for example, we have 21% of the operators who mentioned that the access to inputs was reduced for their consumer, for the farmers in their command area, due to the COVID-19 restrictions. So this is one point. But then we also ask operator, what has happened to your task, to the tasks that you have to perform as operator due to COVID. And so those tasks are the operation, obviously, the maintenance, the collection of information for the acreage and the type of crop, conflict resolution, collection of fees, and the organization of meetings. So this is the type of tasks, these are the type of tasks that the farmers have, the operators have to do for each SIP. And the task which was mostly affected is the collection of fees. So 31% of the operators told us that this is a task which has been disrupted last year. But actually, when we also look at the data on fees collection, we realize that yes, this has maybe been affected, but it's more a delay because we have 92% of the fees, of the Rabi fees, which were collected in October 2020. So probably operators, yes, I've seen some delays, but then they have been able to catch up after a few weeks or few months. That's what we are here assuming. Okay, I just have 2 more slides, and the idea is to be a bit beyond this early result on the Kharif 2 season. We started to look at some secondary data to understand the main challenges and opportunities in terms of solar irrigation in Bangladesh. The first thing we are looking at is this idea of a fee for service business. And the idea that most of us have in mind here is that, is that a profitable business? So we look at the sponsor revenues, and what we are seeing are 2 things. First, the actual cropped area is lower than the base estimate, and the charge per biga also lower than the base estimate. So here we need to know what the base estimate here. Those are base estimate were estimated in terms of the command area, the maximum command area, which can be irrigated. So we need to understand those base estimate as an upper bound of what can be achieved with the equipment. So this being said, we have an average annual revenue from the water charges only in 2019, which is about 1,450 USD per SIP. And the issue here is mostly that the coverage of borrow is lower than what was expected. So that's something we can probably discuss. Then we look at the cost and the capital cost for the sponsor. So the sponsor have to pay the equity upfront. They have to pay, they have to repay their loan, and then they have to pay the interest of this loan. So on average, we estimate that it's a cost of 20,000 USD per equipment. So obviously, comparing the revenue with the cost, we can wonder, is that really profitable? The thing which are more interesting here is to think about the opportunities and way forward. The first opportunity is to think about the development of market support, and ITCOL is working in that direction by putting in place some training for the farmers, for example, etc. So that's something where there are already some progress, but probably more can be done. Then the other thinking is to think about the other source of revenues. The agricultural services, which I mentioned before and which can be combined on the Seep site, is probably one additional source of revenue. But obviously, the idea of connecting to the grid and selling the excess of power will be another source of revenue as well. Beyond this additional source of revenue, we also need to think of the co-benefits. So yes, maybe solar irrigation per se with this fee-for-service business is not as profitable as some would expect, but we also need to give value to the co-benefits. By co-benefits, I'm thinking about poverty alleviation, food security, and climate change and adaptation. So those are benefits which are there, and we probably need to give a value to these benefits to have a bigger picture of the business. So that's my last slide, really starting to think about these co-benefits on climate change and mitigation. So I think other presenters already mentioned this 3.5 million metric ton of CO2 emission per year coming from the diesel, which is used on irrigation. That's clearly used, and we started to do some preliminary calculation. I would really underline here preliminary calculation. And the first result that we are seeing is that maybe the target of a 5% reduction in emission is maybe achievable. So that's quite good news. And that will be quite in line with this target of 10,000 SIPs by 2027, if I'm right. Provided the area covered reaches its full potential. So that's where we need to be careful with this figure, that there are a number of hypotheses and potential caveat behind that. And that's what we'll be working on in the next few months, is really to work around those hypotheses to better understand what's happened. And in working to refine these hypotheses, what we are also thinking to do is to come to a broader question, is that are all the Seeps that we have in place now in Bangladesh, are those really replacing the diesel pump? Yes, no, it's probably a mixed response, maybe not 100%, so that's where we'll need to really understand what's happening. And I would add that even if they don't entirely replace the diesel pump, the question is, do they allow that the expansion of energy access, which anyway is needed for the farmers in Bangladesh, in a country which is energy deficient? So is this expansion able to be covered by the renewable energy? And is this expansion able to target marginal farmers? And I'll simply stop on that.
Thanks a lot, Mari. That was again a very good presentation telling us. I think we keep coming back to the same challenges in terms of utilization of solar pumps. I see we are a bit behind time, but there's a couple of questions from Mohammad Moinuddin, who works with us with CSIRO, and he has been working in Bangladesh for a long time. He has a number of questions around the benefits of solar pumps. So, Mari, if you can quickly, in a couple of minutes, walk through some of his questions. How would SIP help in efficient water management? How does solar irrigation benefit farmer? And last, he asked, how would it benefit poverty alleviation and food security?
Okay. Yes. Well, okay. I saw at the beginning the question on the efficiency. So I suppose we'll get response on that. It's not only on Bangladesh, it's more general, and we'll get response on that on Friday, if I'm right, on the webinar on the groundwater. My response is that solar per se has no reason to increase the efficiency of water. That's about what incentive and how we combine solar with other instruments and with some incentive that we put in place for farmers to better use water. So that's yes, the question is not, I would say, about solar. It's about solar plus what. On the food security, then that's what we want to see, and on poverty alleviation, that's what we want to see. I would say that the richness of the model that we see here in Bangladesh is this type of fee-for-service model, where so farmers themselves are not asked to pay for an equity. They are not owner of the equipment, but then they benefit from the service. But that's also mean that maybe marginal farmers can benefit to water access at a lower tariff that they would do with diesel access. And that's probably where the poverty angle will come in and will bring something different than what we in other countries, for example.
Right. Thank you. And I think one of the examples we are seeing is also a larger share of sharecroppers who are getting water from SIPs, and this would with the 9 rounds of data collection, I think that would be also quite an interesting finding.
Exactly.
So yes. So with that, I would now want to pass on. When we were planning this webinar with our colleagues from EatCall, there was quite a lot of interest about what exactly is India doing, because as you know, a lot of the discussions in Bangladesh is going around the excess capacity of these SIPs and how can we utilize these SIPs energy in non-irrigation season. So I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. J.K. Jethani. He is from India's Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. He's a director, scientist E in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And he has been associated with this sector for over 28 years. And Mr. Jethani will, in the next 10-12 minutes, walk us through India's Kusum program and the plans for grid connection. Over to you, Mr. Jethani, please share your screen.
So, thank you, Aditi. I will share my screen.
Yes.
So I hope it is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Thank you. So just give you a brief about the India's statistics. We have the total land use area of 328.7 million hectares, of which the net swan area is 140 million hectares. The population, as you all know, it's second largest in the world. It's 130 billion. And then fresh water resources, I think it's not 130 billion, it's 1.3 billion. 130 million, okay. Fresh water resources is 4% of the world resources, and water use for agriculture is 80% of the available resources. But GDP share of agriculture is 70%. And the agricultural electricity consumption is 213 billion units, which is 18% of the total agriculture, total electricity consumption in the country. Coming to the agriculture pumps, we have around 22 million of electric grid connected agriculture pumps and 7 million of diesel operated agriculture pumps. And we are paying a lot of money for electricity subsidy for agriculture. It is around 1,000 billion Indian rupees, because most of the states are giving power to the agriculture either at a free of cost or on a very low tariff, maybe less than a rupee or like that. So in March 2019, the government launched this very ambitious scheme called Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha and Utthan Mahabhiyan, or PM Kusum in short, with the objectives to give the water security to the farmers through reliable daytime solar power. There are a number of degraded lands or unused lands available. So we are planning to utilize this land for the promotion of decentralized solar power. And with this, the farmers will get the additional income through sale of surplus power. Water conservation is another aspect for this scheme. And also the topmost is the reduction of burden of subsidy to the agriculture. So this scheme has 3 components. Components A, where these grid connected solar plants up to capacity of 2 megawatt is going to be installed with a total aggregate capacity of 10,000 megawatt. Under component B, we are going to install 2 million standalone solar agriculture pumps of capacity up to 7.5 HP. Of course, the subsidy is available for the pumps of higher capacity, but limited to that available for 7.5 HP only. Similarly, in the component C, which is the solarization of around 1.5 million grid-connected agriculture pumps. So with this total, the solar capacity that is likely to be added is around 30.8 gigawatt by the year 2022. And we are going to provide the central financial support of around 340 billion Indian rupees. Just giving a brief about the component A, the plant capacity would be around 2 megawatt, and the distance we are keeping up to 5 kilometers so that there is no longer transmission lines or losses are there. These plants can be set up by farmers or cooperatives or panchayat or project developers or FPO, water user associations. And primarily we are focusing on the barren or marshy or uncultivated land, but they can also be installed on the agricultural land with state fashion. So they can continue to grow the crops under the solar panels, as we call it the agro PV. Under this scheme, to encourage the distribution companies to purchase the power from these decentralized solar power plants, we are going to provide them a procurement-based incentive, which is rupees 40 paisa, rupees 40.4, it means 40 paisa per unit for the first 5 years. And this power will be purchased by the distribution company at a prefixed tariff that will be determined by the regulator or the state. The duration of the power purchase agreement would be 25 years. And the project can be set up by the developer. In that case, the lease rent to the farmers by developer will be either on the basis of the per acre per year or per unit of energy generated per acre per year. And the lease rent payment directly to the farmers by discoms. So the distribution company will directly pay the lease rent to the farmers rather than, so it gives them an assurity that rent will be paid. Under component B, around 20 million solar pumps are going to be installed with a capacity of around 10,000 megawatt. Pump capacity, as I said, it's up to 7.5 HP. Of course, the higher pump capacity is also allowed, but the limit of subsidy is that of up to 7.5 HP pumps. Again, here individual farmers or water association and community or cluster-based irrigation systems are eligible. Central government is going to provide 30%, state government will provide 30%, and the farmer is to share only 40%. And some of the state governments are providing higher subsidies. Sometimes it is subsidy is 95%, 65% is being given by the state, and only 5% is borne by the farmer in some of the states. So priority will be given to the small and marginal farmers, and the preference will be given to the farmers, those who are using the micro irrigation systems. So this is for the water conservation. Sizing of pump will be based on the water table in that area, land coverage, and quantity of water required. And we are developing a solar pump sizing tool with the support with IWMI under the GIZ project. In dark or black zones, so we are very much concerned about the water conservation, and in these areas where the already notified dark or black zones, so will be replaced by the solar pumps only when they use the micro irrigation techniques. And we have also given an option of universal solar pump controller to enable the use of solar power for other activities, like they can use energy not only for the running of pump, but they can also run other agriculture equipments like shaft cutter or thresher or cold storage, or even for the battery charger. Under component C, the solarization of agricultural pumps is going to be for the 1.5 million. The capacity would be around 9,000 plus megawatt. Pump capacity solarization is for 7.5 HP. And we are going to provide solar panel capacity of double the pump capacity. Suppose if the pump is of 5 HP, so in terms of kilowatt, it is 3.75. And we are going to provide the solar panel for 5 HP pump up to 7.5 kilowatt, so that the farmer can not only fulfill its irrigation needs, but also he can supply the surplus power to the grid and can earn the money. So here again, the individual farmers, what is the association, community cluster-based irrigation systems are eligible. The surplus power that will be sold to the distribution company, for which the tariff will be determined by the regulator. Here we are proposing this feeder-wise implementation, because we have to keep the feeder on during the sunshine hours. So complete feeder is likely to be solarized. And different models are being used, like in case of Gujarat, under the SKY scheme, the Surya Shakti Kisan Yojana, they are implementing the net metering model. In Andhra Pradesh, they have solarized one complete feeder through the BLDC pumps. So the BLDC pumps are running only from the solar energy, and when the pump is not running, they are feeding power to the grid. So there is no drawal from the grid. Another option is the feeder level solarization. Instead of going for the individual solarization, the complete feeder is solarized by putting a small solar power plant at the substation from where the feeder is originating. So this feeder level solarization has been considered as a more efficient and cost effective, because in this case there is no investment from the farmer. So in the individual solarization, the farmer has to pay 40% of amount, because the subsidies amount only 30% from the state, 34% from the central government, and 40% is to be borne by the farmer. But since the farmer is already getting free electricity, so he is not willing to pay 40% for the solarization. So this feeder level solarization is another option which is a more efficient. When I say more efficient, because instead of going for an individual solarization, it's aggregating the total requirement of the feeder and putting a solar plant near the substation from where the feeder is originating. So there is no investment and is fast to can be implemented. States are already implementing the agriculture feeder separation program, because in India we are supplying the agriculture power only for 8 hours, and there are the mixed feeders where we have to supply power for the 25 years. And since the agriculture is heavily subsidized, the state government want to segregate them so that they can provide supply to 8 hours, not for the 24 hours. That program is already running, and many of states have already segregated these agriculture feeders. So what will happen in the case of feeder level solarization? The capacity, the solar capacity that is required for fulfilling the need of this agriculture feeder will be installed through CapEx or RESCO mode. When I say CapEx mode, the entire money will be spent by the distribution company. In RESCO mode, the RESCO developer will come, he will install the plant. There is no investment required from the distribution company. The RESCO developer will supply the power at a pre-bid tariff. And we are going to give the 30% subsidy in case of feeder level solarization also. When I say 30%, it means from the state government, central government side. If the state government also want to provide the subsidy, it is open to them, but it's not binding, as it is binding on for the individual solarization. So once if we consider a CapEx mode, once the CapEx is paid through the saving in the subsidy that is being provided to the agriculture sector, thereafter, and we have calculated that this will take around 4 to 5 years, your CapEx is recovered through the payment of agriculture's electricity subsidy, and thereafter you need not to pay the electricity subsidy for the agriculture. and your solar plant is going to run for another 19 to 20 years. In RESCO mode, there is no investment from the state, but still they will save around 2 to 3 rupees per unit due to cheaper solar power. When I say, because 30% subsidy we are giving to the RESCO developer from the central government side, and you might have heard that the solar power tariff has gone down to 2 rupees or 1.99 rupees during the last bids in India. And the rest in the RESCO mode, the power would be available with 30% subsidy from the central government is around, I would say, maybe 2 rupees or so, or 2 rupees 20 paisa, as against the current cost of supply is around 6 to 7 rupees. So distribution company is definitely going to save a lot of money with the decentralized feeder level solarization. The benefit to the farmer is that they are going to get the reliable daytime power at very, of course, they are already getting a free or low cost, but this is the daytime power. Otherwise, they are getting sometimes during the day, during night, or during the evening hours. So with the feeder level solarization, they are definitely going to get power only in the daytime.
Mr. Jethani, if you
Yeah.
can just wind up in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
thank you.
And we are also proposing this incentivizing the farmers to save the electricity and water. What we are proposing is that we'll benchmark the consumption of the farmers. Suppose in a feeder, the farmer consumption is 1,000 units per horsepower, and if he is using less than 1,000 units, he will be incentivized by providing of 2 rupees or 3 rupees per unit the energy he saved. Under Kusum scheme, there are different financing provision has been made. All three components have been included under priority sector lending norms by the Reserve Bank of India. We have also created the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, wherein interest subvention of 3% is available. The total maximum loan rate is 9%, and with 3% interest subvention, the loan is available at only 6%. For this is for applicable for component B and component C. These are the different financing options for all the component C. When I say component C, it's for the grid connected solarization. If the individual farmer is there, he can get 30% loan, and the loan can be repaid through sale of surplus power. Either distribution company can take loan on his behalf, as has been done by the state of Gujarat, and this is also being followed by the state of Rajasthan. In the feeder level solarization, I have also already mentioned that 30% central subsidy is there, balance state can invest, and the repayment of the loan, the 70% amount that can be taken by as a loan from any NABARD is a agriculture financing institute. So this loan can be repaid through the saving in the electricity subsidy within 4 to 5 years. In the RESCO mode, the RESCO developer will take the loan from the bank. There are different financing institutions available. So there is a win-win situation for all stakeholders under the PM Kusum scheme. So thank you. If there are any questions, I'm ready to take.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jethani, for walking us through the Kusum scheme. I see one relevant question, if you can answer it in a minute or two.
Yeah.
There's one, Mr. Mars Tobias asked that farmers can be incentivized for saving water, etc. How do you ensure that farmers save electricity? He meant water, if they're getting it virtually for free. Didn't quite get that. Especially in water scarce areas, over irrigation is a major concern in solar irrigation.
As I said, what we are planning to do is, under our feeder layer solarization program, we'll benchmark the consumption of farmers based on the historical data. Suppose the historical data says that in this feeder, the average consumption per farmer per HP is 1,000 units. So if the farmer, I will put a meter there, and if the farmer is going to consume less than 1,000, suppose he consumed only 950. So for the 50 units, he will be incentivized through a rate of say 2 rupees or 3 rupees that is to be decided by the state. So he will try to save the electricity and also the water.
Yes, basically, transmit power back to the grid, and then that becomes a source of income. And that is also something we heard from Mr. Jude earlier in the session about those three components that Bangladesh is planning. So, and I saw that all their three components have grid component, grid integration component, and in India, two of those have grid integration component. So now we come to the next part of our meeting, where we have four panelists, and we would be asking them a series of questions based on these presentations, but also based on their own experience and work in Bangladesh. And if the panelists can just switch on their cameras, and so the audience can see who they are, I would just introduce them one by one. They can say hello and introduce themselves. Our first panelist is Mohammad Sarwar Hossain, who is the Deputy Chief Engineer in Bangladesh Agricultural Development Corporation, BADC. He's also acting as a project director, minor irrigation development project, by using solar energy. So he's absolutely the right person to know everything about solar in Bangladesh. Our next panelist is, yes, good evening, Sarwar Bhai. Our next panelist is Mrs. Salima Jahan. She is a civil servant of the government of Bangladesh and has been working for SHREDA as a member. SHREDA is the Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. She has been working as a member SHREDA Joint Secretary since March 2006. Hello,
Good evening,
Salima.
everyone. Good evening.
Yes, nice to have you. Our third panelist is Mohammad Shamshul Huda, who is a superintendent engineer at Barin Multipurpose Development Authority, BMD, and the Ministry of Agriculture. And he has been with BMDA since 2011. And Shamshul Huda has been working with us on this project as well. And our final, yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yes. It's a bit dark, so I don't know if you can switch on some light. We can't quite see your face, yeah. No problem. Our final panelist is Mr. Anwar Hossain, who is the Deputy Executive Director of WAVE Foundation Bangladesh. And WAVE Foundation is one of the ITCOL sponsors, and they implement solar irrigation program on behalf of ITCOL.
Hello, good evening.
Anwar, good evening. Okay. So nice. With those, the way we would run these panel discussions, and then we will also try to take some of the Q&A that is there in the Q&A chat box. And I can already request both the panelists as well as the speakers to go to the Q&A box. And if you see any questions that are relevant to you, please feel free and answer those. Type your answers already. Now, let me come to the panelists and have them walk us through some of the important issues. So, Mr. Mohammad Sarwar Hossain, you have heard our speakers, and then you already know the important role that SIPs can play in reaching out to marginalized farmers. So can you tell us what can be BADC's role in expansion of SIPs in the country, especially in relation to small and marginal farmers? Because if there are two concerns about SIPs and which we are trying to tackle in this project, one is about groundwater overexploitation, and the other is, will it be only captured by rich and big farmers? So tell us your views on how we can include small marginal farmers.
Yes. You know that the Bangladesh Agricultural Development Corporation is a government organization, and BADC serves as an irrigation provider by installing deep tubewell, shallow tubewell, SIP all over the country. BADC introduced SIP in Dhaka division in 2009 to 2011, and after that all irrigation projects organized by BADC have a SIP program. So we have the SIP in every district in now. About 76% of farmers in Bangladesh are small and marginal. So that is the challenge for government to introduce business model to the farmers, to the marginal farmers. But the SIP had a good role in reaching out to the marginal farmers. by providing low cost of water to the farmers in proper time, save them from the maintenance and operation cost of the diesel and electricity, providing them extra benefit like household electricity, water supply, use of solar operated threshing and husking machines, and also for the charger of autobike. They would be benefit by buying extra solar power to the grid by grid integration. So the farmers should go to the ownership model. That's why they can use it very cheaply. And the marginal farmers can, a group farmers can get a solar pump, and that will be effective for the marginal farmers. And we Bangladesh Agricultural Development Corporation will use only the surface water. We don't use the groundwater because we have 10,000 deep tube and shallow tube that's use the groundwater, but we don't want to use the groundwater at that time. And that's why we are operating to 243 SIPs, and that's a provided by a group system, and we only we maintain the all SIPs by engineer, mechanic. So we have the manpower in every upazila, so we can install and maintain the SIP easily, and we have the target to provide 1,000 SIPs in 2023.
Right.
And that will be the achievement for our organization.
Thank you, Mr. Sarwar. There are a couple of questions from the audience. I can see Shamim Reza has asked something about the irrigation license. If there is any prioritization between irrigation license between solar pump and electric pump. So I had also a similar question. What do you think of the new groundwater legislation that requires minimum distance between pumps? And would that impact the growth of solar pumps in Bangladesh? While I understand that BADC does not really install groundwater solar pumps, so you're working mostly with surface. But do you have any views on this groundwater legislation that requires Upazila permits?
Yes, I don't think that the new groundwater legislation would impact the growth of SIP, because we know that every pump has a command area and has a radius of influence. So we can maintain the distance and abrupt use of groundwater with this groundwater resolution and distance for the distance of law. So it also save the SIPs from the electric and diesel operated pump command area, and so that's reduce the conflict of the farmers to get the water from the electric or diesel pump.
So if a new SIP comes and gets a permit, will it displace the existing electric and diesel pump owners?
It is easily displaced by the farmers, because the diesel operated pumps has much cost. So
Much expensive.
Much expensive. So you know that in the last 10 years, maximum diesel operated pumps are licensed to electrify, because it is electrified is cheaper, and SIP are also cheaper. But if SIP have the it is easily by our business model, it is introduced. Those fields, they have the agriculture arable land whole the year. For the farmers, marginal farmers who have worked in the field all the years, all the time in the whole time in the field, they can easily can get the profit from this.
Right. Okay. I will move on to, there are some more interesting audience questions. I would request the panelists, if you already know the answers, please go into this and answer those. And whatever we cannot answer now, we would get back to you later. Now I turn to Mrs. Salima Jahan, member SHREDA. My question to you is, given that the pace of electricity grid expansion has been faster than perhaps was anticipated, as Mr. Jude also said, do you think that grid expansion is a kind of a, is that a threat to solarization? That we had, that the grid has expanded all over Bangladesh. How do you think solarization of irrigation will be impacted in Bangladesh by the availability of cheaper electricity pumps? Because so far, mostly SIPs have been competitive with diesel pumps. Are they also competitive with electric pumps? And in that context, yeah, if I may just continue, if in that context, what are the challenges of implementation of grid integration and net metering? So if you can answer these two questions together.
Okay, thanks, Aditi, for the pertinent questions. As you know, SREDA's mandate is to create an enabling environment for renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation. To do so, SREDA does policy advocacy also with the government. And a guideline on grid integration of SIPs is one of the successful efforts of SREDA in this area. As we know, SIP is a viable option in the off-grid areas. And with 100% grid electrification, we feel that there will be a new avenue before the existing SIPs to be integrated with the grid, and they will be able to evacuate their excess grid to the excess electricity to the grid. And apart from this, there is also a chance to or scope for selling out the excess electricity to the small entrepreneurs of electricity-based activities, small scale activities. So these will add value to the SIPs. As you already know that from the presentations that our existing policies are already supportive of SIPs. And the SIP grid integration guideline has come as a boon to make the venture sustainable. This is our feeling. We'd like to mention that right at this moment, SREDA has no plan to go for any more interventions to make SIPs competitive with grid electricity. We have a plan to keep an eye on the impact of SIP grid integration. In the meantime, we will revise our RE policy 2008. We'll be waiting for the approval of the SIP roadmap submitted to the Power Division and develop an action plan based on that roadmap. So we have to wait till then for next interventions. This is our plan regarding
grid integration. Is there any pilot that has already happened? I believe there has been one or two pilot. Do you have any experience from those grid integration pilots?
Yeah, we have some findings in hand, and those show that this SIP is going to be sustainable with some support. So we'll go for that. But before that, as I have already told, that we need to get the RE policy 2008 revised and get the approval of the draft SIP roadmap. And based on the roadmap, we have to go for some action plans to implement it.
Okay, so we as researchers will look forward to.
Yeah, let's see what happens in the meantime.
Yes, we would keep.
And you had another question. I'd like to address that question.
Yes, please.
Truly speaking, there are many challenges to integrate SIPs with grid. In most cases, the project sites are 10 to 200 plus meters away from the grid. So the first question that comes up in our mind is Will it be feasible for the SIP project owners to connect to grid only to evacuate the excess electricity? The answer is yes in many cases. The next question is who should bear the cost? Here the answer is the project owner. That might sound a bit challenging, but for your information, currently at least 4 projects have been evacuating the excess electricity to grid for free. But once this grid integration guideline is followed, they will get some bulk price for evacuating their excess electricity to the grid. So after that, there could be a couple of more questions like to what extent grid is stable to take this intermittent RE electricity. In the present condition, grid can take up to 10% RE electricity. Right at this moment, the RE share is less than 4%. So, we can go a bit further with the existing level of grid stability. Another question could be whether we need to enhance substation capacity and the capacity of the distribution network. The answer is yes, we do need. And obviously, it's government's responsibility. Some projects have already been working on the capacity development of grid integration of RE. Standing at this point of time, my feeling is with the advent of new technologies, SIP will be a clear business case. We won't need any more supports, financial support from the government to provide. But the technical supports will always be there with SIPs. Or the worst case could be scaling up SIPs won't be a cost-effective idea in future. Maybe a new RE technology will take over. Let's prepare ourselves to accept the reality, be it in favor of SIP or against it. Thanks for bearing with me.
Thank you so much. That was the last bit was quite intriguing, in favor or without of SIP. So we would be tracking SIP development in Bangladesh for the next 4 years. And many of the questions that you have posed, hopefully we would have answers in the duration of our project. Thank you so much for
the questions in the form questions. Those are actually challenges. That's why I handled it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very clear. Now I want to go to Mr. Huda, who is from the Bahrain Multipurpose Development Authority. So right now, as you have asked okay. So we want to know a bit more about BMDA's existing SIPs. They follow a different institutional model than the ITCOL model, which is fee for service model. The BMDA focus is a bit different. So can you tell us some of the opportunities and challenges in the BMDA model? Can you first explain what the BMDA model is, and then how is it different from ITCOL model, and what are your challenges?
Thank you. You know that only BMD has been using Seep for surface water used in Bangladesh.
Yes.
Are you listening?
Yes.
Are you?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. As the Minor Irrigation Survey Report 2018-19, 173,000 numbers lowly pump, that is surface water use pump operated by diesel, and others pump is electrified. So by Multipurpose Development Authority use surface water, it is not problem. There are some many lowly pump, so we are operated lowly pump as a Seep pump. I would like to say about about BMD existing Seep follow a very different institution model than it calls Seep because it runs under. Firstly, Seep operated with prepaid metering system of, of BMD pumps. BMD Seep runs with sufficient and adequate provision for operation and maintenance. All ships runs through under supervision of BMD. You also know as the minor irrigation survey report, BMD operated above 15,000 numbers deep well. BDC operated pump around 12,000 and others maybe private 10,000 deep well pumps are operated in Bangladesh. We see highest numbers of deep well operated under the BMDA own model, that is prepaid metering system and maintenance and operation, logistics support, advocate of BMDA. Seep or deep well, that is all types of irrigation equipment which run by the BMD is under same model. There are no difference model. Seep and deep well, we are run by the prepaid meter and service logistic support sure for the farmer by the BMD. So I think they have no problem. It is another issue. They take their pump or install their pump as their own organized. But BMD organized their pump for their people from GOB fund. Even it's run by another model, same defense model. So they have no challenge between the ITCOL and BMD. Aditi, hello.
Yes. Your target is somewhat different because in terms of ITCOL, the actual the pumps would be eventually owned by the sponsors, and as Mari clearly said, the sponsors are either private entrepreneurs or they're NGO. So our final panelist is one of those ITCOL sponsors, and now I want to invite Mr. Anwar Hossain, who is from Wave Foundation, Bangladesh. I understand Wave Foundation is an NGO. Correct me if I'm wrong. To you, Anwar Hussein, I have this question. In Mari's presentation, you saw that the business sustainability of current SIP models in Bangladesh, especially in the context where production of boro paddy may go down. So what are your reflections on the uncertainties and challenges that you face as a sponsor in expanding your area under SIPs? And my second question to you is, how do you think grid connection will impact your business operation? Also given somewhat uncertainty around grid connection that I took from Salima ma'am's intervention. Please, over to you, Anwar.
Yeah, thank you. And good evening, all of you. In this session, actually, our speaker, panelists, and most of the participants comes from government institutions, the research institutions, and other organizations. I'm only the actually practitioners, and I hope that my opinion should be different because we are facing lots of challenges at the moment. Aditi, just I would like to discuss our previous context. Actually, we started the business since 2015, and the 2015 actually our context was different. Difference mean our agriculture actually crop pattern is changing day by day and very rapidly. When I started this business, actually our only consideration was the rice production. But people are now going to high value crops. And last years, actually, when we started, two years before when we started, 3 years, when we covered which amount we covered under a single Seep plan. And this year we covered 50% of this area, 50%. That is, our revenue is goes then lower 50%. So this is the challenge, and these we are all. I giving to thank Miss Mary. He mentioned lots of issues, and he picked lots of issues from field, and he mentioned his research report, and he also mentioned the challenges area, but he doesn't clear advice, did not clear advice what will be the happening next, how we will pay the loan amount to IDCOL, because he conducted the research on behalf of IDCOL. I hope so, conducted from IDCOL. Am I right? Or no? Oh, then. So the next, I will request you all to IDCOL through you. The 10 years, these business models developed before 10 years, but 10 years now, the situation, the context is completely different. If we want to continue this business, there is a lot of opportunities, no doubt that there are a lot of opportunities, but we have to, because the agriculture sector is huge contribution in our GDP, in our economy. So agriculture is very essential. And rice also, not only the food issue, this is political issue. And our government has commitment to farmers, and government are giving different subsidy to farmers for seed purposes, for fertilizer purposes, different purposes. Then this is the another issues, then government has to handle the irrigations also. Otherwise it will be, already it is now.
I think we lost Mr. Hossain, but overall the point he's saying is about issue of profitability, the fact that if area under Bodo paddy goes down, then their model then gets affected. We just have 3 more minutes left, and I just wanted to come back to some of those panel questions, and I can see our colleague from ITCOL, Mr.
We have a business plan, but we didn't get the single we didn't get the revenue single amount from the field, and this is the climate issue. So we have to consider all these issues, and our last
Okay. So, Anwar bhai, we have lost you again. Yes, we have lost you. Hello.
Internet
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And this is the actually final weapon in our hand. As soon as possible, we have to do this work, and we have, this is our future, the grid connectivity. If we able to do this, and we able to generate the revenue through this process, then it is possible to sustain. Otherwise, otherwise it is already, it is in very threatening position.
Right. That's a great intervention, and there I can also see one question from Kazi.
And another issue that is the rate of interest of loan. We are giving 6% loan of rate of interest to each call, but our market is the Bangladesh, already our government has regulated the bank interest, and our bank interest now is very low. Savings interest only 4%, 3 to 4%, but now we are giving 6% to each call. So I will request to consider these issues also, and this should be
Right.
mentioned.
Thank you
very
so much. Thank you so much. We have run out of time, and I just wanted to take one question and pose it to Salima ma'am. It's Hassan's question is, will the tariff be increased for grid integration, and is there any opportunity to provide subsidization for poles and cables if the sponsors provide the grid connection work order to the utilities? Has there been, what I understand, would you like to respond to that, Salima?
Okay, thank you for the question. I have to get back to my expert pool to answer the question. I have
No
no
worries.
ready answer to that. Sorry for that.
Yes,
Thank you.
no worries. The other question that is there for all the panelists is around the feasibility of standalone small pumps, zero point 0.5 to 1 horsepower. Martina Groenmeyer is asking that question. Then there was also another question from Kazi asking, well, a similar question about the challenges of group ownership of a single pump. I think that question can be answered by either Mr. Huda or by Mr. Hossain. I don't know who is Mr. Sarwar Hossain. What could be the challenge? Is there a challenge of small standalone pumps, which is, I believe, the component C or component A of your roadmap? Can you take that question, Mr. Sarwar Hossain? You're muted. You are muted, Mr. Sarwar Hossain. Yes.
Yes. With BADC, we are using three types of pumps now in that time. We have 0.5 horsepower, 1 horsepower, and 1.5 horsepower. And so we don't have any challenge because the farmers our land are maximum land are paddy, so farmers need bigger pump, but we think so 1 horsepower is suitable.
Okay. Then I also see a number of questions around groundwater, and for all of them, I would like to say that please join our webinar on Friday when we are looking exclusively at the groundwater implications of SIP, and then we will have speakers from all the 4 countries to answer some of these questions. There's a question I think that somebody from ITCOL can answer, but perhaps also our panelist here can answer, whether arsenic contamination of groundwater has also been taken into account. What I understand from the ITCOL citing is that they do take into account arsenic contaminated area and avoid citing of SIPs there. Is that correct? Mari, would you, or Mari or Tishman, Mari, would you like to come in there?
Yes, I don't think I will add more than what you just said, Aditi, that what we know is that the site selection makes sure at first that there is no arsenic contamination in the selected locations. That's what we understood.
Right. So I think this brings us to the end of the webinar, and some of the major parts that some of my major takeaways has been, while there are various models for SIPs in Bangladesh, not all of them are yet operational. Many of them are in mostly pilot form. And one of the interesting ones that we from a solar project perspective would be following up is the model of ADB funded project to BREB, where individual solar pumps are being tried. So does there would be some kind of comparison between does the kind of fee for service model versus these individual models, what are the advantages and disadvantages? The other big issue is around the use of solar pumps for a limited number of days, most of it being entirely dependent on boro cultivation, though I also understand from ITCOL and from the work that Mari has done that all other crops are also being grown. But a lot of the financial model is based on the supposition that farmers would grow a lot of their area under boro, which is the more water intensive crops. what happens if cropping pattern changes? Then one of the questions that Anwar Hussein of Wave Foundation was saying, that their entire financial model gets into a bit of a problem if farmers are not using as much water as boro paddy needs. That brings us to the question of grid integration. Can grid integration be a solution to both these problems in terms of having providing these extra electricity back to the grid? And there I understand is that while there is a policy of net metering, etc., a lot of it is something that would be worked out in the future, and we would be keeping close track of the developments and follow that from a research perspective. With that, I would just like to share with all of you that we have two more. I'll just share it. We have three more. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank you, all the participants, for attending today. We have noted your questions and we will get back with answers over the course of next week. I would also want to let the participants know that we have three more webinars remaining. Tomorrow morning, we would be looking at Nepal, and the Nepal's questions are also very similar to Bangladesh around grid connection, while their pump sizes are entirely different. They happen to be much smaller pumps. Then tomorrow afternoon, that's 3 p.m., 2:30 p.m. Islamabad time, we would be looking at the context of Pakistan. And then on Friday, again 3 p.m. India time, we would be discussing the implications of groundwater. I hope most of you, many of you would be able to join us for those webinars. And I would take this opportunity to thank also our co-organizers, Eat Call, where the Deputy CEO was supposed to deliver the vote of thanks, but he had been called up for another important meeting. He cannot join us, but we have other colleagues from Eat Call, and I thank all of them for helping us organize, and all the speakers and the panelists. Thank you very much, and see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.